I'm James Wilson, 34 years old, and my parents left my 5-year-old daughter alone in the ICU while I was at my wife's funeral. Before I tell you how a single, overlooked detail from a traffic camera destroyed their entire empire, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. The air in the cemetery was cold. It was the kind of damp, bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the late October weather and everything to do with the freshly dug earth. I stood there in my black suit, the one Emma always said made me look handsome, and watched as they lowered the love of my life into the ground. Every part of me felt hollowed out, scraped clean by grief. But underneath the pain there was a different kind of ache, a frantic, gnawing anxiety. My daughter, Lily, she was just 5. She was lying in a hospital bed across town, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred, fighting for her life after the same accident that had stolen her mother from us. And the only people in the world I could trust to watch over her, or so I thought, were my parents. The service was a blur. Hands on my shoulder, murmured condolences that sounded like buzzing flies. My sister Sarah held my arm, her own eyes red-rimmed. Emma's parents, Robert and Linda, looked shattered, but they still managed to give me a look that said, "We are here for you." My best friend Thomas stood by like a silent guard. They were my rock. But my mind was at the hospital. The moment the last shovel of dirt was thrown, I made my excuses. I couldn't breathe the funereal air for another second. I drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I practically ran through the hospital's automatic doors, down the sterile white corridors that smelled of antiseptic and fear, to the pediatric ICU. And I saw it. The chair next to Lily's bed was empty. My daughter, my tiny, fragile Lily, was alone. A nurse was checking her drip, her expression professional but distant. Panic, cold and sharp, stabbed through my grief. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. It rang twice. My mother answered, her voice bizarrely cheerful. "James? How did it go? Where are you?" The words came out like a strangled gasp. "Why isn't anyone here with Lily?" There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of wind and seagulls in the background. "Oh, we decided to join Michael on his trip to the Hamptons. We just landed." I couldn't process it. "The Hamptons? We're doing this for the family's future, James," she continued, her tone maddeningly reasonable. "Your father has that big real estate conference. This deal is crucial. The doctors are the best. Our being there doesn't change the medicine, but missing this conference could ruin everything." I squeezed the phone, the plastic creaking under the pressure. My throat was so tight I couldn't speak. My wife was dead. My daughter was in the ICU, and they were in the Hamptons closing a deal. "Don't be so dramatic, son." My father's voice cut in, taking the phone from her. "It's not like she knows we're gone. The staff is paid to watch her." That was it. That was the moment the grief in my heart curdled into something else. Something cold, hard, and heavy. I looked through the glass at my daughter, her small chest rising and falling with the help of a machine. My parents hadn't just left her. They had abandoned her. They had abandoned us. I hung up. I didn't say another word. The shock faded, replaced by a chilling, terrifying clarity. I wasn't going to break down. Couldn't. For Lily, I had to fight. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, that this war was just beginning. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe it was, and I just refused to see it. Looking back now, the signs were all there, like hairline fractures in the foundation of a house you desperately want to believe is solid. My family, the Wilsons, were real estate, not just a job and identity. My father, Richard, built an empire from the ground up, and my mother, Martha, was the perfect corporate wife. Elegant, socially adept, and obsessed with appearances. They had a blueprint for their lives, for their legacy. It included 2 sons. The first was my older brother, Michael, the golden child. The second was me, the spare part. Michael was a surgeon. He was charismatic, ambitious, and he'd never once in his life disappointed our parents. I was quieter. I found my passion not in buildings or stocks, but in code. I became a manager at a tech firm. It was a good job, a successful career by any normal standard. But in the Wilson family, normal was a failing grade. Then I met Emma. It was at a charity gala my company was sponsoring. I was hiding out near the bar, trying to avoid small talk, when I heard her laugh. It was a sound full of life, a sound that could cut through the dull hum of the room. She was in a wheelchair, her left leg gone below the knee, but she carried herself with more grace and confidence than anyone in that ballroom. She was a motivational speaker, an advocate for people with disabilities. She didn't just live with her circumstances. She commanded them. I was in love before I even knew her name. For me, her missing leg was just a part of her story, like the color of her eyes or the way she bit her lip when she was thinking. It made her stronger, more compassionate. To my family, it made her damaged goods. I'll never forget the first time I brought her to a Sunday dinner. The silence at the table was heavy enough to suffocate. My mother examined Emma with a polite, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. My father asked intrusive questions about her prognosis, as if she were a faulty investment. Michael was the worst. He leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips. "You know, James," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "it's admirable what you're doing, charity work. But for a life partner, you can do better." Emma just smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Don't worry about me, Michael," she said, her voice steady. "I know my worth. The question is, do you?" Only my younger sister, Sarah, and my best friend, Thomas, saw Emma for who she was. They loved her instantly. This memory is seared into my brain for a reason. It reminds me of another one, from years earlier. I was maybe 15. I'd spent months on a project for the state science fair, a rudimentary AI program that could predict weather patterns. I won first place. I came home, clutching the blue ribbon, my chest puffed out with a pride I'd never felt before. My father was in his study on the phone. I waited. When he hung up, I showed him the ribbon. He glanced at it, a flicker of something, annoyance, in his eyes. "That's nice, son." He turned away, picking up the phone again. Michael just scored the winning goal for the varsity team. He boomed to whoever was on the other end. "The kid's a champion, a natural-born winner." I stood there, holding my ribbon, feeling like I was invisible. It wasn't just about achievement. It was about image. I remember when I was 10, I found a stray dog, a little scruffy mutt with one floppy ear and the biggest, most loving eyes you've ever seen. I named him Patches. I begged my parents to let me keep him. Reluctantly, they agreed. For 2 months, Patches was my best friend. He followed me everywhere. Then one day, I came home from school, and he was gone. My mother told me, without a trace of emotion, that they had taken him to a shelter. "He just wasn't the right fit for our family, James," she'd said. "He didn't have a pedigree." A month later, for Michael's birthday, they bought him a purebred golden retriever with certified papers. The dog was beautiful, but it had cold, empty eyes. That was their philosophy in a nutshell. If it didn't look perfect on paper, it was worthless. Patches was worthless. My science project was worthless. And years later, the love of my life, Emma, was worthless. I see now that Michael wasn't just the asset. He was the pedigreed dog. I was the stray. And when I brought Emma into the family, I had cemented my status. I had chosen love over legacy. I had chosen a liability of my own. We got married in a small ceremony in a botanical garden. Emma's parents, Robert and Linda, were there, their faces beaming with genuine joy. They were warm, kind people who hugged you like they meant it. Sarah was there, and so was Thomas. My boss, Catherine, even came with her husband, Daniel. It was a perfect day, filled with love and laughter. My parents and Michael refused to attend. They sent a card with a check inside, a cold, transactional gesture that felt more like an insult than a blessing. The rift that formed that day never healed. 3 years later, Lily was born. The joy I felt holding her for the first time was indescribable. It was a pure, fierce, protective love that rearranged my entire world. My parents made a grudging visit to the hospital. They cooed over Lily, their first grandchild, but their interactions with Emma were still laced with a frosty politeness. Michael would stop by occasionally, a storm cloud in our sunny apartment. He'd watch Emma change Lily's diaper and say things like, "Are you sure you can manage that with your condition?" He wasn't concerned. He was undermining her, planting seeds of doubt, trying to prove his original point. She wasn't good enough. The tension simmered, always just below the surface. Then, I got a promotion at work. A big one. Put me in a senior management position, overseeing a major new project. It was a validation of my work, of the path I had chosen. It was also, I later found out, a position Michael had been trying to get one of his well-connected friends into. My success was, in his eyes, another act of defiance. Another win for the wrong son. At a tense Thanksgiving dinner, he cornered me. "You're so wrapped up in your little perfect life," he sneered, gesturing towards Emma and Lily. "You're forgetting your obligations. This family built you, and you spit on it." "My family is right over there," I said, my voice low, "and I will never apologize for choosing them." Looking back, that was the last real conversation we ever had. The night of the accident is a collage of broken images. The screech of tires, the blinding glare of headlights, the horrifying crunch of metal. I remember Emma's arm flying out instinctively to shield Lily in her car seat. That was her last act. A mother's love, absolute and final. Waking up in the hospital to the news was like being plunged into a nightmare you can't scream your way out of. Emma was gone. And Lily was fighting. Serious injuries. The ICU. The doctors used words like critical and monitoring closely. My world had ended. And in the smoking wreckage of it all, I had to do the impossible. I had to plan a funeral for my wife while praying for the life of my daughter. It was in that fog of despair that I made the call. The call to my parents. I asked them, I begged them to sit with Lily on the day of the funeral. Just for a few hours. So she wouldn't be alone. "Of course, son," my father had said. "We're family. We'll be there." And I, like a fool, believed him. I stood in that cemetery, burying my wife, holding on to the one single thread of comfort that my daughter was safe, watched over by her family. That thread didn't just break. They had taken a pair of scissors and cut it themselves, without a moment's hesitation. The memory of my father's words, "It's not like she knows we're gone," echoed in the silent hospital corridor. It was the sound of the foundation of my life finally crumbling to dust. In the sterile quiet of the hospital, after the phone call, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The grief was still a roaring ocean inside, but on the surface the water was still. My first call was to Emma's parents. I explained, my voice flat and devoid of emotion, what had happened. There was a sharp intake of breath on Linda's end. Then Robert's voice, firm and resolute. "We're on our way. Don't you worry, James. We're on our way." My sister Sarah called next. She'd heard the panic in my voice when I left the cemetery. "What's wrong, James? Is it Lily?" "Lily's the same," I said. "Mom and Dad aren't here. They went to the Hamptons with Michael." The silence on her end was damning. "Then, they what?" I didn't need to say more. I knew my sister. She was the one Wilson with a conscience. My boss, Catherine, showed up an hour later. She was a no-nonsense woman with a sharp mind and a surprisingly kind heart. She took one look at my face and the empty chair and her expression hardened. "Where are your parents?" she asked, her voice low. I told her. Her lips thinned into a hard line. "Unbelievable," she muttered. She pulled out her phone. At the time, I didn't know the first thing about her husband, Daniel, other than he was a quiet, pleasant man who seemed to adore her. But as Catherine made the call, I realized there was more to their story. "Daniel, it's me. I'm at the hospital with James Wilson." "Yes, that one. His daughter is in the PICU, and his family just abandoned her. I want a dedicated nurse assigned to her 24/7, and I want the best pediatric specialist on this coast reviewing her case. Now." She listened for a moment. "I don't care about the protocol. You're on the board. Make it happen." She hung up and looked at me. "It's done," she said. It was the first time in hours I felt like I could almost breathe. Help was coming. Not from my blood, but from the family we had built. The family Emma and I had chosen. And as for the Wilsons, they had made their choice too. And they had no idea of the storm they had just unleashed. The hours that followed were a testament to the family we had built. Robert and Linda arrived, their faces etched with their own grief, but they swept into that ICU room with a singular purpose. Lily. Linda started humming a lullaby Emma used to love, and Robert, a big man who always seemed so gentle, just rested his hand on the edge of Lily's incubator, as if to transfer his own strength to her. They were a shield. Thomas showed up with bags of food I couldn't eat and a coffee that I nursed for hours. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat with me, a silent, solid presence in the chaos. My neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins, an elderly widow who Lily had adopted as a surrogate grandmother, called to say she was lighting a candle for her at her church. My colleague, Frank, took over all my work responsibilities without even asking. This was family. It was loyalty. It was showing up. Meanwhile, a different kind of storm was brewing in the Hamptons. Sarah, my firecracker of a sister, had gotten off the phone with me and, fueled by a righteous fury, had called my parents. They didn't answer, so she called the hotel Michael had bragged about on his social media. She got his room number. She called again and again. Finally, my mother picked up, annoyed. What followed was not a conversation. It was an eruption. Sarah, standing in her own living room, shouted into the phone, her voice cracking with disbelief and rage. What were you thinking? You left her alone? Do you have any idea what you've done? In the ICU, while her father was burying his wife. From what Sarah told me later, my mother tried her usual, dismissive tone. Sarah, you're being hysterical. It's a business matter of the utmost importance. The Wilson legacy is on the line. Legacy? Sarah screamed, her voice hitting a raw, furious pitch. What legacy? The one where you leave a 5-year-old fighting for her life so you can go to a conference? I saw James's face at the cemetery. He's broken. And you're worried about a legacy? That's what you want carved on your tombstone. She valued a real estate deal over her own granddaughter? The argument got louder, uglier. My father grabbed the phone. You don't understand the pressure, Sarah. This deal is everything. No, you don't understand. She fired back. Everything that actually matters in this world is in a hospital room right now, and you are not there. You are not his family anymore. You are monsters. The shouting spilled out from their hotel room. A guest in the hallway, annoyed by the noise, started recording on their phone. They captured the tail end of it. Sarah's furious, tear-streaked face on a video call, and her final, damning words before the screen went black. The person who recorded it had no idea of the context. They just saw a wealthy family in a fancy hotel having a very public, very ugly meltdown. They posted it online with a simple caption, "Drama in the Hamptons. Someone's not happy with mom and dad." It was a small spark, but the internet is a field of dry grass. Within an hour, someone who knew our family saw the video. They connected the dots, the timing, the funeral, the sick child. They commented, "This is about the Wilson family, the ones whose daughter-in-law just died. They left their granddaughter in the ICU to be at this hotel." The spark hit the gasoline. The video and the story behind it exploded. It was shared on local news forums, on parenting groups, on social media platforms. The name Wilson was suddenly attached not to luxury real estate, but to an act of breathtaking cruelty. Michael, the golden child, who prided himself on his public image as a caring surgeon, had his social media flooded with angry comments. My father's company, Wilson Holdings, started getting 1-star reviews on every platform imaginable, filled with comments about their family values. And I knew none of it. I was in the hospital bubble, watching the steady rise and fall of my daughter's chest, when my phone buzzed. It was my mother. I ignored it. It buzzed again. My father. Ignored. Then a text from Michael. "Call me. Urgent." I looked at the phone, then at Lily. The world outside didn't matter. Then another text, this time from my mother. James, you need to make a statement. You need to tell them this is a misunderstanding. The press is calling. This is a nightmare. A misunderstanding. They thought a public statement could fix this. They thought they could manage the narrative, spin the story. They still didn't get it. They hadn't done something that looked bad. They had done something that was bad. They had shown the world exactly who they were. Robert came over and put a hand on my shoulder. What is it, son? I showed him the text. He read it, his expression hardening. He looked at me, his eyes full of a father's protective fire, the kind of fire my own father lacked. You don't owe them a thing, he said, his voice a low growl. Your only job is right here. He was right. My war wasn't going to be fought in the press. It was going to be fought with silence, with boundaries, with a finality they couldn't possibly comprehend. I put my phone on silent. I watched as Daniel's promised help arrived. A new, dedicated nurse who introduced herself and said her only job was to watch Lily. The head of pediatric neurology came by to personally review her chart. The administrative mess melted away. Outside, the storm they had created was raging. They were getting a taste of what it felt like to be helpless, to have their perfect world spin out of control. They had left my daughter in a sterile, lonely room. And in doing so, they had locked themselves out of our lives forever. There was no key. There was no way back in. They just didn't know it yet. I looked at the picture of Emma I had taped to Lily's incubator rail, her brilliant, defiant smile. I've got this, I whispered. I promise. I picked up my phone again, but I didn't call them back. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years, but one Emma had always trusted completely. Olivia Brent, her best friend from law school, a shark in a designer suit. She answered on the second ring. James? Is everything okay? No, I said, my voice steady for the first time in days. But it's going to be. Olivia, I need your help. I want them to pay. The days that followed were a strange mix of quiet dread and focused action. The ICU became my world. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors was the soundtrack to my life. But I wasn't just a passive, grieving father anymore. I was a general marshaling my forces. The phone call to Olivia had flipped a switch inside me. I was done reacting. I was going to act. My first order of business was to take control. I sat down with Thomas, my phone, and a legal pad. Okay, I said, my voice hoarse. We need a plan. I'm with you, man. Whatever you need, he said, leaning forward. The accident, I said. I need to know everything. The police report, witnesses, anything. My memory of the crash was a blur of headlights and terror. I needed facts. Thomas, ever reliable, nodded. I'll get on it. I'll make the calls. Next, I called Frank, my mentor at work. Frank, I don't know when I'll be back. Don't even think about it, kid, he said, his gruff voice a comfort. Your job is to be a dad. We've got everything covered here. You just focus on Lily. That single conversation lifted a mountain off my shoulders. Then came the hospital itself. It was a bureaucratic maze. Forms, insurance questions, scheduling conflicts for specialists. It was overwhelming. I remembered what Catherine had said. Taking a deep breath, I called her. James, how are you holding up? I'm managing, I said. Catherine, you mentioned your husband, Daniel. You said he was on the board. I hate to ask. Don't you dare apologize, she cut in. I'm connecting you right now. A few minutes later, I was on the phone with Daniel. He was calm, efficient, and deeply kind. James, he said, Catherine told me the situation. Consider it handled. You will not have to deal with another piece of hospital paperwork. You will get the best care. Focus on your daughter. Let me handle the noise. And just like that, the noise stopped. A wall of protection was being built around us, brick, by the people who truly cared. While I was building my fortress, the Wilsons were trying to weather the firestorm they'd started. The story had gone from a local viral moment to a national headline on second-tier news sites. Real estate tycoon abandons granddaughter in ICU for Hampton's getaway. Their carefully constructed public image was shattering. Sarah kept me updated in hushed phone calls. "They're in full crisis mode," she whispered one night. "Dad hired a PR firm. Michael is threatening to sue people for defamation. Mom is blaming everyone but herself. It's a circus. Let them burn," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I felt nothing for them. No pity, no anger, just a vast, empty distance. A couple of days later, Thomas came back to the hospital, his face grim. "I got a copy of the preliminary police report," he said, sliding a folder onto the small table. "It's pretty standard. Says a car swerved into your lane. You corrected, lost control." The official summary felt so clinical, so sterile. Felt like a dead end. I felt a familiar wave of helplessness. So, a random hit-and-run driver destroyed my family. "Maybe not so random," Thomas said, his brow furrowed. "One of the witnesses, a truck driver, said the other car was a high-end black sports car. Said it was driving like a maniac for miles, weaving in and out of traffic." He paused. "And the cops found something at the scene. A small piece of a custom fender. From a very expensive, very specific model." I just stared at him. It didn't mean anything to me. But then Thomas, who had known Michael his whole life, who had seen him show off every new toy, suddenly went still. His eyes widened. "Wait a minute," he said slowly, looking at me. "A black sports car? A custom job?" He pulled out his phone and started scrolling furiously through Michael's social media. "No way," he breathed. He turned the phone around. The picture was from a week before the accident. Michael grinning, leaning against a gleaming, brand-new, black European sports car. The caption read, "New toy for the golden boy. Watch out, peasants." A cold dread, heavier and more sickening than anything I had felt before, settled in my stomach. Couldn't be. It was too monstrous, too evil. "Thomas," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Did the witness get a license plate?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "It happened too fast. It's just a description. It's not proof." But it was a seed of a horrifying possibility. I immediately called Olivia. I told her about the car, about Michael's post, about the fender fragment. There was a long silence on her end. Then she spoke, her voice all business. "Okay, James," she said, her tone sharp and focused. "This changes things. This is no longer just a family dispute. My investigator is a retired cop named Sal. He's a bulldog. I'm putting him on it. I'm filing a motion to get access to the full police investigation, including forensics. And I'm going to subpoena Michael's vehicle location data and service records. We're going to find that car." The eye of the storm had passed. I was no longer just defending my daughter. I was hunting, and for the first time I knew who my prey was. The next few weeks were a battle on two fronts. The first was Lily's recovery. It was a slow, grueling process. There were small victories, a flutter of her eyelids, a squeeze of my hand, that felt like miracles. With the top-tier care Daniel had arranged, she was slowly, miraculously, pulling through. She was eventually moved from the ICU to a long-term pediatric rehabilitation facility, a place of quiet hope and hard work. This became our new home, our new world. The second front was the legal one. It was a silent, methodical war waged by Olivia and her bulldog investigator, Sal. Motions were filed. Subpoenas were issued. A quiet, relentless pressure was being applied to my brother. My parents and Michael, meanwhile, were losing their war for public opinion. Their PR firm was failing. The story had stuck. They were pariahs. Their desperation led them to their most audacious, most disgusting move yet. One afternoon, I was sitting with Lily while she worked with a physical therapist. The doors to the facility's common area opened, and in they walked. My father, my mother, and Michael. They weren't alone. They had a photographer with them, a man with a long-lens camera trying to be discreet and failing miserably. My mother was carrying a ridiculously oversized teddy bear. My father had a strained, somber expression plastered on his face. Michael looked hunted, but he was trying to project an aura of concerned remorse. It was a performance. A horribly transparent, staged photo op designed to show the world a grieving, reunited family. They saw me. My mother started forward. Her voice pitched to a level of saccharine sweetness that made my skin crawl. James. Oh, we were so worried. We came as soon as we could. I stood up. The physical therapist, sensing the tension, quietly moved Lily's wheelchair back. All the patients and families in the room fell silent, watching. I walked towards my parents, my footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Get out, I said. My father's face flushed with anger. Now see here, James. We are your family. We have a right to see our granddaughter. You lost that right in the Hamptons, I said, my voice as cold and hard as granite. I looked past them to the security guard by the door, a large, weary-looking man named Gus who had always been kind to us. I met his eyes. Gus, these people are trespassing. They are not on the visitor list. Please remove them. Gus nodded slowly and started walking towards us. The photographer, realizing his shot was about to be ruined, started snapping pictures frantically. You can't do this, my mother shrieked, her composure finally cracking. We are the Wilsons. You're nothing to me, I said. Now leave, before I have you removed for causing a disturbance in a medical facility. The sight of Gus, solid and impassive, was enough. They turned, defeated, and were escorted out, their ridiculous teddy bear left abandoned on the floor. The entire scene was captured on half a dozen cell phone cameras by other patients' families, who had seen my lonely vigil for weeks. Within an hour, the story of the staged hospital reconciliation was everywhere. It was the final nail in the coffin of their public reputation. After they were gone, one of the other fathers, a man whose son had a room down the hall, came over to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. Good for you, he said quietly. You're a good dad. We've all been watching. You're not alone here. His simple words of solidarity meant more to me than any apology from my parents ever could. But the real unmasking happened not in public, but in the quiet, wood-paneled conference room of Olivia's law firm. The first step was the restraining order. We went to court. Their high-priced lawyer tried to paint me as an unstable, grieving man who was irrationally pushing his loving family away. Olivia calmly presented the evidence. The timeline of their trip, the sworn affidavits from the hospital staff about Lily being left alone, the viral video of their public meltdown, the witness statements from the rehab facility. The judge, a stern-faced woman who looked like she had seen it all, granted the restraining order without hesitation. It was a clean, decisive victory. That was the win the public saw. The real bombshell came a week later. I was in Olivia's office. She had a thick file on her desk. James, she said, her voice serious. Sal found it. The needle in the haystack. We got it. She opened the file. Michael's car was in the shop for 2 weeks right after the accident. The work order was for front-end bodywork and a new custom fender. He paid in cash. Very quietly. My blood ran cold. But that's not all, she said, sliding a photograph across the desk. It was a grainy image from a highway traffic camera, time-stamped just moments before the crash. It showed my car in one lane, and in the lane next to it, pulling slightly ahead, was a black sports car. The angle was bad. You couldn't see the driver. The police almost missed this, Olivia said. But Sal had a hunch. He spent 3 days combing through traffic footage from every highway leading out of the city from that afternoon. He found it. Then he pushed the cops to enhance the image. She slid another photo over. This one was clearer. A zoomed-in shot of the black car's windshield. You could just make out a sticker on the corner. Parking permit. For the hospital where Michael worked. Couldn't breathe. It gets worse, Olivia said, her voice soft now. The forensic analysis of the fender fragment they found at the scene? It's a perfect match for the make and model of Michael's car. But the key was the paint. It had trace elements from the paint on your car. The report is conclusive. His car made contact with yours. She let that sink in. My brother. He had been there. He had hit us. But why? I whispered, the question hanging in the silent room. Olivia looked at me, her eyes full of a grim pity. She turned to the last page of the report. The accident reconstructionist's analysis. Based on the skid marks and the point of impact, it wasn't a simple sideswipe. The movement was sharp, aggressive. It was a deliberate swerve. She slid the report across the desk. I stared at the words, but they swam before my eyes. My mind flew back to every sneering comment, every belittling remark, every moment of jealous rage. The competition he felt. The hatred for the simple happiness I'd found with Emma. It wasn't just about a job or a legacy. It was personal. He didn't just want me to fail. He wanted to break me. Olivia's voice cut through the haze. He wasn't just driving recklessly, James. The DA is looking at this now. They believe he intentionally tried to run you off the road. The truth, in all its monstrous, unthinkable horror, was finally out. My brother hadn't just contributed to the accident. He had caused it. He had murdered my wife. He had almost killed my daughter. The man who was supposed to be a healer was a destroyer. The golden child was a monster hiding in plain sight. The revelation in Olivia's office wasn't a loud explosion. It was a quiet, seismic shift that cracked the world open. The district attorney's office moved swiftly. With the evidence Olivia's team had uncovered, they had more than enough. Michael was formally charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, and leaving the scene of an accident resulting in death. The last charge, a felony, was the one that carried the most weight. The news broke like a dam. It wasn't just a gossip column story anymore. It was on the national news. Prominent surgeon charged in hit-and-run death of sister-in-law. The name Wilson was now toxic. Michael was immediately suspended from the hospital pending the investigation. His carefully curated image of a brilliant, life-saving doctor was incinerated overnight, replaced by the mugshot of a cold-eyed, violent criminal. His partners at his private practice bought him out, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. The fallout for my parents was just as swift and brutal. My father had built his empire on a reputation of strength, integrity, and family values. That reputation was now a joke. A major investor in his latest high-rise project, a deeply religious family man, pulled his funding, citing a moral turpitude clause in their contract, a direct consequence of the public scandal. Another long-term partner backed out of a billion-dollar resort deal they'd been working on for years. The viral video of them being escorted out of the rehab facility was now viewed in a much more sinister light. They weren't just callous. They were the parents of an alleged murderer, trying to stage a photo op. Their social life vanished. Invitations were rescinded. Friends stopped returning their calls. My mother, who lived for her status and her charity balls, was effectively exiled. The House of Wilson, a structure built on money and image, was collapsing in on itself. A week after the charges were filed, they showed up at my apartment. It was the first time they had breached the restraining order. I saw them on the lobby camera and told the doorman to send them away. They refused to leave. Finally, I went down not to talk, but to end it. They looked diminished. My father's expensive suit seemed to hang off him. My mother's face was a mask of pale, desperate anxiety. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw animal fear. James, my father began, his voice raspy. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, I said, my voice flat. I stood in the doorway, blocking their path. You have to help him, my mother pleaded, her voice breaking. You have to tell the DA it was a mistake, an accident. He's your brother. I stared at her. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it left me breathless. They weren't there to apologize. They weren't there to express remorse for Emma, or for Lily, or for me. They were there to save Michael, to save the family name. Their priorities, even now, were monstrously, pathologically skewed. He's not my brother, I said, the words falling like chips of ice. A brother doesn't try to run his family off the road. A brother doesn't kill his sister-in-law and leave his niece to fight for her life. It was a moment of anger, my father insisted, his voice rising. He was under a lot of pressure. He deserves a second chance. Did Emma get a second chance? I shot back, my own voice rising for the first time. The sound echoed in the marble lobby. Did Lily? She has scars, both inside and out, that will never heal. Because of him. Because of his jealousy and his rage. I looked from my father's desperate face to my mother's tear-streaked one. I felt nothing. The well of emotion I had for them had run completely dry. There was no anger left, no sadness. Just a profound, irrevocable emptiness. Emma gave me more family in 5 years than you gave me in 34. She taught me what love is. You taught me what it isn't. This is the last time we will ever speak, I said, my voice lowering to a calm, final whisper. You are to make no attempt to contact me, or my daughter, ever again. If you do, I will enforce the restraining order to the fullest extent of the law. You will be arrested. I looked at my father. Your empire is crumbling because it was built on a lie. You valued image over integrity, and success over love. This is the result. I looked at my mother. You wanted a perfect family, and you were willing to sacrifice anyone who didn't fit into your perfect picture. Now you have nothing. I stepped back into the doorway. The honor of this family, I said, the words tasting like ash, died the day you left a 5-year-old girl alone in the ICU. My family is upstairs. You, I said, looking at them one last time, are strangers. I closed the door, shutting out their shocked faces, their pleas, their entire toxic world. I leaned against the wood, my heart pounding, and for the first time since the funeral, I felt a sense of peace. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It wasn't about hatred. It was about boundaries. I had finally, completely cut the cord. The house of Wilson had fallen, and I was free. 2 years. It's funny how time works. 2 years can feel like a lifetime and a blink of an eye all at once. The world moves on, the seasons change, and slowly, painstakingly, you learn to build again. The legal battle ended not with a dramatic trial, but with a plea bargain. Faced with the mountain of incontrovertible evidence, Michael pled guilty to vehicular manslaughter and aggravated assault. The DA agreed to drop the more severe charges in exchange. He was sentenced to 15 years in state prison. I didn't attend the sentencing. His fate was no longer my concern. My focus was on the future, not the past. The Wilson empire didn't just crumble. It turned to dust. The criminal conviction of their golden child was the final blow. My father's company filed for bankruptcy. The sprawling mansion I grew up in was sold to cover legal fees and debts. I saw a picture of them once, in a tabloid, looking gray and haggard, a world away from the powerful, glamorous figures of my childhood. They tried to reach out a few times through lawyers, offering settlement money, proposing trust funds for Lily. I refused it all. We didn't need their blood money. We were building our own life on our own terms. And what a life it was. Lily was my sun, my moon, and all my stars. She recovered. The scars on her small body were a permanent reminder of what we had lost. But they didn't define her. She had her mother's spirit, that same bright, resilient, defiant spark. She laughed easily, she loved fiercely, and she had an artist's soul. Our apartment was a gallery of her colorful, chaotic, beautiful drawings. With the unwavering support of Catherine and Frank, I thrived at work. I was promoted to a senior director position. The job gave me the financial security to provide Lily with everything she needed. But I wanted to do more. I wanted to create a legacy Emma would be proud of. With help from Olivia and a significant seed donation from Daniel, who had become a close family friend, I established the Emma Wilson Foundation. Its mission was simple: to provide immediate financial and logistical support to families who had lost a loved one in a sudden accident. We helped with funeral costs, childcare, grief counseling, legal aid, all the nightmarish details that descend when a family is at its most vulnerable. Just last week, we helped a young mother whose husband died in a construction accident. She was about to be evicted. We covered her rent for 3 months, and Olivia's firm handled the workers' comp claim pro bono. I saw the relief in her eyes, the gratitude. I saw a flicker of the same strength I had seen in Emma. We were turning our pain into a purpose. The foundation grew, fueled by community support and the story of the woman who had inspired it. My family was no longer defined by blood, but by choice. Robert and Linda were doting grandparents, spending every weekend with us. Sarah, who had become completely estranged from our parents, was a constant, loving presence in Lily's life. Her cool Aunt Sarah who taught her how to climb trees and tell silly jokes. Thomas and his wife were our go-to for game nights. Catherine and Daniel, Frank, Mrs. Jenkins, Olivia, they were our village. They had stood with us in the darkest of times, and now they stood with us in the light. One evening, Catherine and Daniel were over for dinner. The sound of Lily's laughter filled the apartment as she played with their golden retriever. The atmosphere was easy, comfortable. "James," Daniel said, looking at me across the dinner table. "We've been thinking about something." Catherine reached out and put her hand on his. "We see how much love you have in this home," she said, her voice soft. "And we see how wonderful Lily is. Have you ever thought about giving her a sibling?" I stared at them, confused. I don't think I'm ready to date, Catherine." She smiled gently. "We weren't talking about dating. Daniel and I have been involved with foster care and adoption agencies for years. It's a passion of ours. We know the system. We know the people. If you ever wanted to consider adoption, we could help you navigate it." The suggestion hung in the air, shimmering with a possibility I had never dared to imagine. To bring another child into this home. To give Lily a brother or a sister. To grow our family not from loss, but from love. It felt like a window had been thrown open in a room I didn't even know was stuffy. A fresh breeze, full of hope and new beginnings. I looked at Lily, her face bright with joy as she hugged the dog. I thought of Emma, and I knew with every fiber of my being that she would have loved the idea. Our family wasn't broken. It was just different, and it was about to get bigger. That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't dream of the crash. I dreamed of the future. Today is Lily's 7th birthday. Our apartment is loud and bright, filled with balloons, the smell of pizza, and the happy chaos of children. Our family is here. Robert and Linda are trying to teach a group of kids a complicated magic trick. Sarah is in the middle of a mock sword fight with foam noodles. Thomas is on grill duty on the balcony. Catherine and Daniel are laughing with Frank and his wife. Mrs. Jenkins is holding court, telling stories to a rapt audience of 5-year-olds. It's a beautiful, perfect mess. After we cut the cake, and Lily, with a serious expression, makes her wish, I dim the lights. "Okay, everyone," I say. "Time for a birthday tradition." I point the remote at the TV, and a video starts to play. It's one of a dozen Emma recorded before she died, after a health scare had reminded her of life's unpredictability. One for each of Lily's birthdays until she turned 18. Emma's face fills the screen. She looks so beautiful, so alive. It still steals my breath away. "Happy 7th birthday, my sweet Lily Bug," she says, her smile lighting up the screen. "By now, you're probably way too cool for your mom, but I hope you'll still listen. I want you to remember to be kind, but also to be brave. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small." She winks. "And listen to your dad. He can be stubborn sometimes, but that's only because he loves you more than anything in this world." The room is silent, everyone watching, captivated. I look at Lily, her eyes wide as she stares at her mother's image. This is how she knows her. Through my stories, and through these precious messages. A legacy of love, preserved on a hard drive. Later, after the guests have gone and Lily is asleep, clutching a new art set, I stand on the balcony, looking out at the city lights. Sarah comes and stands beside me. "She's a great kid, James," she says quietly. "She's the best." I agree. We stand in comfortable silence for a moment. "Have you heard from them?" Ask. I don't have to say who them is. Sarah shakes her head. "Not in months. I think they're finally gone." "Good," I say. I think back to that day in the hospital, the cold fury, the feeling of being utterly alone. It feels like another lifetime, a story about someone else. The Wilsons, with their stone and steel empire, had taught me what family isn't. Emma, and this incredible patchwork group of people who had rallied around us, taught me what it is. It's not blood. It's not a name. It's not an obligation. It's a choice. It's showing up. It's fighting for each other. It's building a fortress of love and loyalty around the people who matter, a fortress so strong that no storm can ever tear it down. My life is not the one I planned. It's messier, harder, but infinitely richer. It's a life forged in fire and rebuilt with love. And as I look out at the endless expanse of lights, I feel a profound sense of peace. The house I was born in has fallen, but the home I have built is stronger than ever. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it has touched you in some way. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.